Motors temporarily shutting down more than half of its plants in North America.
General Motors plans to close its plant in Lordstown, Ohio.
The numbers are staggering, the silence is deafening, and the betrayal runs deeper than anyone imagined. Right now, at this very moment, hundreds of thousands of drivers are piloting ticking time bombs down America's highways. Their crime? Trusting a corporation that chose profits over people, silence over safety, and shareholders over the families who believed in their brand. What if the engine under your hood was designed to fail? What if the company that built it knew about the defects years before you ever signed the papers? And what if the fix they're offering will cost you thousands more while protecting their bottom line? By the end of this video, you'll see how one of America's largest automakers turned engineering into extortion, warranties into weapons, and customer loyalty into a liability. Because this isn't just about defective engines. This is about a system that's rigged against you from the moment you drive off the lot. The Whisper network breaks. It started in the shadows of online forums and service bay conversations, a pattern too consistent to ignore, too alarming to dismiss. Engines weren't just wearing out. They were dying violent. Sudden deaths that left families stranded and mechanics baffled. Picture this, a premium truck, fresh off the lot with fewer than 20,000 miles, suddenly seizes on a busy interstate. No warning lights, no gradual symptoms, just catastrophic failure that transforms a symbol of American engineering into 6,000 pounds of dead weight rolling toward disaster. These weren't isolated incidents. Across the country, the same nightmare was playing out in different driveways, different highways, different lives. Owners who had invested their trust and their savings into what they believed was proven technology were discovering that their vehicles carried a fatal flaw, one that the manufacturer had been tracking for years. The Whisper network of mechanics, owners, and industry insiders began connecting dots that painted a disturbing picture. Internal service bulletins referenced unusual wear patterns. Warranty claims showed clustering around specific engine components. And somewhere in corporate boardrooms, executives were making calculations about liability, timing, and the cost of staying silent versus the cost of speaking up. What they discovered would expose not just a mechanical defect, but a corporate strategy that treated customer safety as a variable in profit equations. The engine failures weren't accidents. They were the predictable result of decisions made in conference rooms where market share mattered more than the families, depending on reliable transportation. But the mechanical failure was only the beginning. What came next would reveal how corporations weaponize complexity to shift responsibility, delay accountability, and ensure that when the bill comes due, it's the customer who pays. The engineering time bomb. Deep inside the heart of these premium engines lay a design philosophy that prioritized efficiency over endurance. The pursuit of government-mandated fuel economy targets had led engineers down a path that would prove catastrophic for real-world performance. The specifications told the story of compromise. Ultra-thin lubricants that flowed like water, tighter tolerances that left no margin for error, manufacturing processes that prioritized speed over precision. Every decision was justified by laboratory tests that bore little resemblance to the brutal reality of highway hauling, stop-and-go traffic, and the demanding cycles that define actual ownership. Internal documents would later reveal that quality control engineers had raised red flags about bearing clearances, oil flow patterns, and thermal stress points. Their warnings painted a picture of an engine that might excel in controlled testing environments, but would struggle under the variable loads and conditions that real drivers encountered daily. The metallurgy itself was questionable. Bearing surfaces that should have been precision machined showed microscopic irregularities. Oil passages contained debris from the manufacturing process. Crankshaft alignment fell outside acceptable tolerances in a significant percentage of units. Each defect alone might have been manageable, but together they created a cascade of failure points. Temperature mapping revealed another critical flaw. Under heavy load conditions, precisely when truck owners needed maximum reliability, oil temperatures spiked beyond the design parameters of the thin lubricants specified by the manufacturer. The result was oil starvation in critical areas, leading to bearing wear that accelerated exponentially once it began. Engineers knew that the combination of these factors created engines that might run smoothly for months before experiencing sudden, catastrophic failure. They also knew that by the time symptoms appeared, the damage was already irreversible, yet production continued, and marketing materials continued to promise the durability and reliability that the engineering team knew their design couldn't deliver. This wasn't incompetence, it was a calculated risk. The question wasn't whether engines would fail, but when. And in that timing lay the key to understanding the corporate strategy that would follow. The Great Deception unfolds. When reports of engine failures began surfacing, the corporate response followed a playbook that had been refined through decades of crisis management. Deny the pattern, question the maintenance, suggest operator error. Above all, avoid acknowledging any systemic issue that might trigger widespread liability. Service departments received training on how to deflect warranty claims. Owners reporting engine problems were told their cases were isolated incidents or abnormal usage patterns. Technical service bulletins were quietly distributed to dealers with instructions to perform specific diagnostic procedures designed to find alternative explanations for failures. The strategy was sophisticated and systematic. Create enough procedural obstacles that frustrated owners would abandon warranty claims. Delay repairs until warranty periods expired. When forced to authorize replacements, require extensive documentation that few consumers could provide. Every step was designed to minimize financial exposure while maintaining plausible deniability about the scope of the problem. Meanwhile, production continued at full capacity. Marketing campaigns continued to emphasize reliability and durability. Fleet sales continued to target businesses that depended on vehicle uptime for their livelihood. The disconnect between internal knowledge and external messaging was complete and profitable. The human cost was mounting. Families found themselves stranded in dangerous situations when engines failed without warning. Small business owners faced equipment failures that threatened their livelihoods. Fleet operators dealt with downtime that cascaded through their operations, affecting schedules, contracts, and customer relationships. Each failure created ripple effects that extended far beyond the immediate repair costs. Lost wages from missed work, alternative transportation expenses, the psychological stress of losing faith in a major purchase, the financial strain of unexpected repair bills on vehicles that were supposed to be under warranty protection. But the most insidious aspect of the deception was yet to come. When public pressure finally forced the company to acknowledge the problem, their solution would prove to be another layer of the same strategy, shifting costs to consumers while protecting corporate interests. The illusion of the fix. When mounting pressure finally forced acknowledgement of the engine defects, the corporate response seemed decisive. A comprehensive recall affecting hundreds of thousands of vehicles, free inspections and repairs, a public commitment to making things right with affected customers. The reality was far more cynical. Instead of addressing the fundamental design flaws that caused the failures, the fix consisted primarily of changing oil specifications. Owners were instructed to switch from the originally specified lightweight oil to a much thicker formulation. Service departments replaced oil caps and updated owners' manuals to reflect the new requirements. On the surface, this appeared to be a reasonable engineering solution. Thicker oil would provide better lubrication under high-stress conditions and might extend the life of engines with marginal bearing clearances. The company presented laboratory data showing improved performance with the heavier lubricant. The hidden costs were substantial and immediate. The thicker oil created more internal friction, reducing fuel economy by 10 to 15% in real-world driving conditions. For owners who had purchased their vehicles based on advertised efficiency ratings, this represented a permanent reduction in one of the key performance metrics they had paid for. Over the life of the vehicle, the reduced fuel economy translated to thousands of dollars in additional operating costs. A truck that had been advertised as achieving 20 miles per gallon might now struggle to exceed 17. For high-mileage drivers, this difference meant spending an extra $100 to $200 per month at fuel pumps. The resale impact was even more damaging. Used vehicle buyers began avoiding trucks that showed evidence of the oil specification change, viewing it as a signal of underlying problems. Vehicles that underwent the recall fix saw their market values drop by thousands of dollars overnight. Insurance companies took notice as well, adjusting premiums based on the increased risk profile of affected vehicles. Some commercial fleet policies specifically excluded coverage for engine failures related to the known defects, forcing business owners to self-insure against catastrophic mechanical problems. The most troubling aspect of the fix was its timing. Industry analysts noted that the oil change would likely push most engine failures beyond the standard warranty period, effectively transferring the financial responsibility from the manufacturer to the vehicle owner. What appeared to be customer service was actually sophisticated cost shifting. The warranty weapon. The warranty system, designed to protect consumers from defective products, became a weapon in the hands of corporate strategists determined to minimize their exposure to legitimate claims. The mathematics were ruthless. Standard powertrain warranties covered 5 years or 60,000 miles, whichever came first. By implementing an oil change that delayed failures until just beyond these limits, the company could effectively immunize itself against the majority of potential claims while maintaining the appearance of having addressed the problem. Owners who experienced failures at 62,000 miles found themselves facing repair bills that often exceeded $15,000. Replacement engines, labor costs, and related damage quickly accumulated to figures that represented a significant percentage of the vehicle's original purchase price. For many families, these unexpected expenses created genuine financial hardship. The warranty denial process was refined to an art form. Claims were subjected to extensive investigation that often took weeks or months to complete. Owners were required to provide maintenance records that many had not anticipated needing to preserve. Any gap in documentation became grounds for denial, regardless of the vehicle's actual condition or usage history. Service departments received training on how to identify alternative explanations for engine failures. Oil contamination could be blamed on extended service intervals. Bearing wear could be attributed to aggressive driving. Any evidence that might support an owner's claim was subjected to scrutiny that virtually guaranteed finding some basis for denial. For the small percentage of owners who successfully navigated the warranty process, the experience was often so frustrating and time-consuming that it served as a deterrent to others who might otherwise pursue legitimate claims. The message was clear. Even valid warranty claims would be met with bureaucratic obstacles designed to exhaust the patience and resources of all but the most persistent consumers. The human toll of this strategy was measured in broken trust, financial stress, and the grinding frustration of dealing with a system designed to wear down legitimate claimants. Families who had saved for years to afford a reliable vehicle found themselves facing unexpected expenses that threatened their financial stability. The legal avalanche. As evidence of the systematic nature of the engine defects accumulated, the legal landscape began shifting in ways that would ultimately cost the company far more than honest disclosure would have. Class action lawsuits emerged in multiple jurisdictions, each seeking to represent thousands of affected owners. The legal teams assembled massive databases of failure reports, warranty claims, and internal company documents that painted a damning picture of corporate knowledge and deliberate concealment. Discovery proceedings forced the disclosure of internal communications that revealed the true timeline of corporate awareness. Emails between engineers, executives, and legal teams showed that key decision-makers had been briefed on the defects years before any public acknowledgement. The contrast between internal discussions and external messaging provided powerful evidence of deliberate deception. Technical expert witnesses dismantled the company's claims about the adequacy of the oil change fix. Independent testing revealed that the fundamental design flaws remained unaddressed and that failures would continue to occur regardless of oil specifications. The recall was exposed as a delay tactic rather than a genuine solution. The financial exposure grew exponentially as courts granted class certification and consolidated cases across multiple states. Potential damages included not just repair costs, but diminished vehicle values, increased operating expenses, and punitive awards designed to deter similar conduct by other manufacturers. Regulatory investigations proceeded in parallel with the civil litigation. Federal agencies with oversight authority began their own examination of the company's disclosure timeline and recall procedures. The possibility of criminal charges against corporate executives emerged as investigators uncovered evidence of deliberate concealment of safety-related defects. State attorneys general, sensing political opportunity in a case that pitted corporations against consumers, launched their own investigations and enforcement actions. The legal pressure was building from multiple directions simultaneously, creating a cascade of exposure that far exceeded the original cost of honest disclosure and proper remediation. The company's stock price reflected investor recognition that the legal costs would ultimately dwarf the original manufacturing savings that had motivated the defective design decisions. What had begun as cost optimization was transforming into a financial catastrophe that would impact shareholders, employees, and customers for years to come. The competitive feeding frenzy. While the company struggled with legal battles and public relations disasters, competitors moved aggressively to capitalize on the reputational damage and market uncertainty. Rival manufacturers launched advertising campaigns that subtly emphasized reliability and durability. Coded messages that resonated with consumers who had lost faith in the affected brand. Extended warranty programs were introduced specifically to address concerns about engine longevity. Marketing teams crafted messages that promised transparency and accountability without explicitly mentioning their competitors' problems. Fleet customers, particularly sensitive to downtime and reliability issues, began shifting their purchasing patterns. Large commercial accounts that had represented steady revenue streams for decades started exploring alternatives. The financial impact was immediate and substantial, as these high-volume customers represented some of the most profitable segments of the business. Dealer networks reported that consumers were actively avoiding the affected models, even when offered substantial discounts. The stigma associated with the engine problems had contaminated the entire product line, forcing dealers to offer incentives that eliminated profit margins just to move inventory. The used vehicle market reflected similar dynamics. Resale values for affected models collapsed as buyers demanded steep discounts to compensate for perceived reliability risks. This created a vicious cycle where current owners faced unexpected depreciation losses, while potential buyers found little reason to choose the troubled vehicles over competing alternatives. Industry analysts noted that the competitive damage extended beyond immediate sales losses. The incident had undermined the company's reputation for engineering excellence and manufacturing quality. Intangible assets that had been built over decades but could be destroyed in months. Rebuilding that reputation would require years of flawless execution and substantial investment in quality improvements. The talent drain was equally problematic. Engineers, designers, and executives began leaving for competitors who offered not just career opportunities, but also the chance to work for organizations that hadn't compromised their professional reputations. The loss of institutional knowledge and experience would handicap recovery efforts for years to come. The regulatory reckoning. Federal oversight agencies, initially slow to respond to the crisis, eventually mobilized investigations that would fundamentally reshape industry practices around defect disclosure and recall procedures. Congressional hearings provided a public forum for affected consumers to share their experiences, while subjecting corporate executives to pointed questioning about their decision-making processes. The televised proceedings exposed the disconnect between corporate policies and consumer protection in ways that generated widespread public attention and political pressure for reform. Regulatory agencies expanded their oversight authority and enforcement capabilities in direct response to the crisis. New requirements for defect reporting, recall implementation, and consumer notification were designed to prevent similar incidents from developing undetected for years before triggering public acknowledgement. The financial penalties imposed by regulators were structured not just as punishment for past misconduct, but as deterrents designed to ensure that future cost-benefit analyses would properly account for the risks of concealment and delay. The $888 million settlement represented one of the largest regulatory penalties in industry history. Criminal investigations explored whether corporate executives had violated federal laws regarding consumer safety and securities disclosure. The possibility of individual accountability for corporate decision-making created new incentives for transparency and early intervention when safety issues emerged. International regulatory agencies used the crisis as justification for expanding their own oversight authority and enforcement capabilities. The global nature of automotive markets meant that reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny extended far beyond domestic markets, multiplying the long-term competitive disadvantages facing the company. Industry-wide changes in quality control procedures, warranty policies, and defect response protocols emerged as other manufacturers sought to avoid similar crises. The incident became a case study in business schools and regulatory agencies worldwide, ensuring that its lessons would influence corporate behavior for decades to come. The consumer awakening. Perhaps the most significant long-term impact of the crisis was the transformation it triggered in consumer expectations and behavior around automotive purchases and ownership. Social media networks that had previously focused on enthusiast discussions evolved into sophisticated information-sharing platforms where consumers could track reliability patterns, share maintenance experiences, and coordinate responses to manufacturer misconduct. The democratization of information meant that corporate attempts at concealment were far more likely to be detected and exposed by vigilant consumer communities. Purchasing decisions began incorporating new factors as consumers recognized that manufacturer reputation and warranty terms were insufficient protection against systematic defects and corporate misconduct. Independent reliability data, long-term ownership costs, and manufacturer response to previous problems became key considerations in vehicle selection processes. The financial literacy of automotive consumers increased dramatically as the crisis educated buyers about the hidden costs of ownership and the limitations of manufacturer warranties. Consumers learned to calculate total life cycle costs rather than focusing solely on purchase prices and monthly payment amounts. Legal awareness also expanded as consumers learned about their rights under warranty and consumer protection laws. The class action lawsuits generated widespread publicity about legal remedies available to victims of manufacturer misconduct, creating informed consumer communities that were far more likely to pursue aggressive legal strategies when problems emerged. The relationship between manufacturers and consumers fundamentally shifted from one based on trust and brand loyalty to one based on verification and accountability. Consumers demanded transparency, independent validation, and meaningful consequences for corporate misconduct in ways that previous generations of buyers had not. This awakening created lasting changes in market dynamics that extended far beyond the immediate crisis. Manufacturers faced consumer bases that were more skeptical, better informed, and more willing to pursue aggressive remedies when their expectations were not met. The financial avalanche? The true cost of the engine defect crisis ultimately exceeded even the most pessimistic initial projections as cascading effects multiplied the financial impact across multiple business areas. Direct recall costs, initially estimated in the hundreds of millions, quickly escalated as the scope of affected vehicles expanded and the complexity of remediation became apparent. The oil change solution, while cheaper than engine redesigns, still required dealer labor, documentation, and parts distribution across a massive service network. Legal settlements and regulatory penalties added another layer of financial exposure that continued growing as new cases emerged and existing litigation expanded. The $888 million regulatory settlement was just one component of total legal costs that analysts estimated would ultimately exceed $2 billion when all civil litigation was resolved. Lost sales represented an ongoing drain on revenue that was difficult to quantify but impossible to ignore. Market share declines in key segments translated to billions in reduced revenue over the years required for reputation recovery. The competitive advantages gained by rivals during the crisis would prove difficult and expensive to recover. The impact on dealer networks created additional financial pressures as franchisees struggled with inventory that had become difficult to sell and service obligations that exceeded normal profit margins. Dealer failures and network consolidation reduced market coverage and increased distribution costs across remaining outlets. Stock price declines reflected investor recognition that the crisis would impact profitability for years beyond the immediate recall and settlement costs. The market capitalization's loss exceeded $10 billion at its peak, representing wealth destruction that affected pension funds, individual investors, and employee retirement accounts. Credit rating downgrades increased borrowing costs for capital investments and operating financing, creating additional headwinds for recovery efforts. The higher cost of capital reduced the company's ability to invest in new product development and quality improvements at precisely the time when such investments were most critical for competitive recovery. The path forward. The engine defect crisis ultimately forced a fundamental reconsideration of corporate priorities and business practices that would reshape the company's operations for years to come. Quality control procedures underwent complete restructuring with new oversight mechanisms designed to ensure that engineering concerns received appropriate attention before reaching production. Independent quality audits, expanded testing protocols, and enhanced defect tracking systems were implemented to prevent similar problems from developing undetected. Warranty policies were expanded and simplified to reduce the bureaucratic obstacles that had frustrated consumers during the crisis. Extended coverage periods, streamlined claim procedures, and proactive customer notification systems were designed to rebuild trust through demonstrated commitment to customer protection. Corporate governance reforms included new reporting structures that ensured safety and quality concerns reached senior management without filtering or delay. Board-level oversight of quality issues and regulatory compliance was enhanced to provide independent validation of management decisions and policies. The customer service organization was rebuilt from the ground up with new training, procedures, and performance metrics focused on transparency and accountability rather than cost minimization. Service department policies were revised to prioritize customer satisfaction and safety over short-term financial considerations. Product development processes incorporated new stage gates and review procedures designed to identify potential quality issues before they reached production. Independent testing and validation became standard procedures for all new powertrains and safety-critical systems. The long-term success of these reforms would ultimately depend on sustained management commitment and organizational culture change that prioritized customer safety and satisfaction over short-term financial performance. The crisis had demonstrated the ultimate cost of compromising these priorities, but organizational memory tends to fade as new challenges emerge and new leaders take responsibility for strategic decisions. For consumers, the crisis provided lasting lessons about the importance of independent information, legal awareness, and collective action in holding corporations accountable for their products and policies. The awakening of consumer vigilance and activism represented perhaps the most important long-term outcome of the entire crisis. The engine scandal exposed more than mechanical defects. It revealed a system where corporate interests routinely override consumer safety. The $888 million penalty was just the beginning. Real change requires vigilant consumers who refuse to accept corporate excuses and demand accountability at every level. Stay informed. Stay vigilant. The next crisis is already developing somewhere in a corporate boardroom where executives are making calculations about your safety and their profits.